Imagine a night when the stars seem to whisper ancient secrets, and a weary heart finds, among the shadows, the light of unexpected hope. Have you ever felt as if something bigger was watching you, guiding your every step? Today I invite you to embark on this journey, where every beat of the song "God Only God" reveals not only the divine strength, but also the transformation of a soul that refuses to surrender. In this story, you will learn about the journey of a character who, in the midst of pain and uncertainty, discovers the path to redemption. Stay tuned, because every minute holds surprises and the promise of an inexplicable destination. Get ready to be moved, reflect, and above all, believe that where there is faith, there is always a miracle about to happen. In a peripheral neighborhood of a large city where skyscrapers rose imposingly, and at the same time concrete found refuge in the hidden corners of alleys and squares, a silent and powerful story was born. Miguel, a young man with an intense look and a restless soul, lived his daily routine between the inconstant noise of traffic and the whispers of hope that intertwined with each drop of rain. Even amid the monotony of an existence marked by hard work and small daily struggles, something pulsated inside him, a forgotten dream that refused to fade. Miguel's awakening took place on an autumn morning. The leaves, in a spectacle of vibrant colors, danced softly in the rhythm of the wind, while the sun, shy, began to rise behind the clouds, illuminating the narrow streets of the neighborhood. In this poetic scenario, the young man, still immersed in his thoughts, felt an inexplicable lightness, as if the first rays of light had the power to awaken not only the day, but also a sleeping corner of his own essence. As he walked along the sidewalks marked by time, Miguel absorbed every detail as if the world were painted with the most delicate nuances of hope. The aroma of coffee that spread through the bakeries, the distant murmur of conversations that mixed smiles and tears, and even the rhythmic sound of the hurried steps of pedestrians formed a daily symphony loaded with meanings. It was in this context that he began to notice something unique, a subtle but irresistible sound that blended into the urban environment, as if the city itself whispered in his ears the message that there was much more than that immediate reality. As he approached an old square, where a small fountain carved in stone still preserved the memory of better times, Miguel stopped for a few moments to enjoy the scenery, his eyes fixed on the delicate movement of the water reflecting the light of dawn, and something inside him awoke. The sound, now unmistakable, took on body and form. A soft melody like a forgotten hymn echoed through the air. It was the song "God Only God," which seemed to come from an unexplored place, loaded with mystery and revelation. In the midst of the passing crowd, he suddenly felt alone, not in the sense of loneliness, but of being in front of an intimate and exclusive calling. Every musical note, every chord resonated deeply in his heart, awakening memories of times when faith was lived intensely, even without fully understanding its meaning. The feeling was as if a hidden door opened, allowing the glow of a once-abandoned dream to invade his soul. The song, more than a simple melody, became a portal to a universe of possibilities where the divine was intertwined with everyday life. Miguel vaguely remembered the moments of his childhood, when his imagination was free to dream without limits, and every story told by his grandmother seemed to have magical powers. At that time, the myths and legends of good and evil formed a kaleidoscope of colors and sensations, and faith was something so pure that it was mixed with the innocent joke of the days. But over the years, the daily rush and naked challenges of life had drowned out this inner flame. Now, in the wake of that singular morning, her heart vibrated with the intensity of an ancestral call. It was time to regain the lost essence, to relive that forgotten dream that promised a silent and transformative redemption. As the melody intensified, Miguel allowed himself to close his eyes for a brief moment. In the silence of that closed gaze, he could see vivid images, a flowery field under a deep blue sky, an ancient bridge that connected him to the history of his ancestors, and a radiant light that seemed to emanate directly from above, as if calling him to a journey of self-knowledge and renewal. The fog that surrounded his feelings had dissipated, allowing each heartbeat to become a rhythmic beat toward the unknown. This inner awakening was, above all, a personal achievement, the first step towards regaining one's faith and rediscovering the real meaning of one's existence. The environment around Miguel seemed to transform in response to his perception. The colors gained greater intensity. The sound of the birds blended harmonically with the murmur of the city, and time seemed to slow down so that every detail could be appreciated for all its uniqueness. In every face he found around him, he saw reflections of similar stories. Lives that, although marked by adversity, carried within them a flame of hope, ready to be revived in the face of a magical moment. The feeling of rebirth invaded every inch of his perception. From that moment on, Miguel understood that sound was not just a distant echo of a song, but the divine breath that invited him to rescue his beliefs and allow faith to start pulsing again in his routine. He began to see the challenges in a new light. Each obstacle, each pain, became a step that elevated him towards a deeper understanding of himself and consequently of God. In a metaphor that was present in each scene, the resonance of the song reverberated like the waves of the sea that, persistent, softly shaped the sand of the coast. The awakening of a forgotten dream was not a sudden event, but a continuous process, where each moment of introspection and each small gesture of faith made up the map of a journey that would culminate in the definitive transformation of his soul. On that memorable day, as Miguel walked through the square, the feeling of déjà vu enveloped him. It was as if each step led him back to moments from a distant past, but which were now reinventing themselves with a new meaning. The song, "God, Only God," symbolized the fusion between pain and hope, between human frailty and the invincible strength that resides in the hearts of those who decide to believe. And so, the young man gave himself body and soul to the awakening process, a silent but powerful new beginning, which promised to transform not only his journey but that of all who let themselves be touched by his story. Thus, under the dim and welcoming light of dawn, Miguel took the first step towards a destination that, until then, seemed unreachable. In the soft echo of the song, he found the bracelet that linked him to the divine, the certainty that, even in the chaos of everyday life, there is a lighted path for those who dare to dream again. And, with this renewed certainty, the young man began a journey that, despite being full of uncertainties and challenges, promised to reveal the beauty hidden between the shadows and the light that, insistently, always returns. In the midst of the routine marked by repeated encounters and disagreements, Miguel experienced moments in which the rush of everyday life turned into a kind of background noise that could barely drown out the distant sound of an unspoken promise. On an afternoon that stubbornly persisted, with a sky tempered by dense clouds and colors that oscillated between the gray and the golden of the evening, the young man found himself immersed in an atmosphere where every breath of wind seemed to carry with it secrets of a long-awaited destiny. It was in this setting, permeated with an enveloping stillness, that the silent call of fate began to manifest. Miguel walked along a street with little movement, flanked by small shops and facades painted with the simplicity of the stories of ordinary people. Despite the seemingly innocuous environment, an inexplicable feeling took hold of his mind and heart. He noticed that with each step, time seemed to slow down, allowing him to intensely absorb details that would otherwise go unnoticed. The distant murmur of conversation, the clinking of cups in a nearby cafe, and the faint rustle of tree leaves made up a subtle symphony that invited him to listen more closely. In the middle of this urban scenario that seemed suspended between the past and the present, Miguel came across a peculiar figure, Sitting on a worn-out wooden bench, a man with a deep look and a serene smile wore simple clothes. His hands, marked by time and labor, carried the wisdom of decades lived. The old man, who seemed to know the secrets of the world and the destinies of others, emanated an almost palpable aura of tranquility and participation in something greater than material existence. Without needing words, this encounter aroused in Miguel a fierce curiosity. Who was this man, and how could he be the embodiment of a silent call? The old man began to speak slowly, as if each syllable was carefully calculated to reach the core of his interlocutor's spirit. He told stories that blended with reality as if they were fables, intended for those who believed in the existence of a universe ruled by invisible and benevolent forces. He recounted, in a voice that oscillated between melancholy and hope, episodes from his youth, moments when, even in the face of adverse circumstances, he felt the presence of a supreme force guiding his steps, leading him towards transformative discoveries. Each word uttered by the old man seemed to bring the freshness of a late awakening, instigating Miguel to resignify his own experiences and to look to the future with a renewed look. As the sun slowly said goodbye, tinting the horizon with intense shades of orange and purple, the conversation between the young man and the man deepened. The old man shared how, in the midst of life's uncertainties and pains, a subtle call, almost imperceptible to others, always led him to decisions that altered the course of his destiny. He spoke of how that call did not come in the form of fanfare or spectacular miracles, but rather as a soft voice which insinuated itself between the moments of silence when the world seemed to rest. This voice, he said, was the essence of God manifesting himself in an intimate and personal way, inviting each one to reconnect with the meaning of existence. Miguel, deeply moved and absorbing every detail with the intensity of someone who discovers a treasure long buried, came to understand that the call of fate did not need to be noisy to be felt. It was necessary, rather, to be attentive to the small signs, to those moments of pause and reflection that life so generously offered. Each gesture, each look exchanged with strangers, each forgotten detail of everyday life gained a new meaning. They were coded messages of love, of care, of a universe that conspired in favor of those who had the courage to listen with an open heart. As the conversation went on, the world around seemed to have turned into a scenario of synesthesia, where the sound, color, and aroma of the environments mixed in a harmonious dance. The air carried a scent of wet earth, mixed with the distant smell of fresh coffee and the sound of the clock of the old tower nearby, with its rhythmic ticks, fit perfectly into the narrative of time that was running, but which, at that moment, seemed suspended. Miguel then felt that all that picture was a preparation for him to understand what fate had in store. It was as if all the layers of reality were there to show that, although the paths were winding and challenging, there would always be a reason, a why, behind every decision, behind every obstacle. The elderly man emphasized that the divine call is never presented in an imposing or aggressive way. On the contrary, it reveals itself in the subtlety of a look, in the delicacy of a gesture, and, above all, in the ability to touch the soul without it even realizing how deactivated it was. For him, the true importance lay in recognizing when this inner voice was heard, and more than that, in having the courage to move forward, even when the horizon was cloudy and the path was full of uncertainties. Fate calls us in ways we can't decipher right away, he said with a calm that seemed to defy time itself. But it's up to us, with faith and determination, to decipher every symbol he presents to us. As he got up to say goodbye, the old man left Miguel not just the words, but a living lesson that the signs of destiny are everywhere, waiting to be noticed by those who are willing to see beyond the surface. As he left behind a silence that reverberated through the young man's soul, as if the air had been impregnated with the presence of something absolutely sacred. Miguel stood still for a few moments, absorbing every word, every sigh shared in that unexpected encounter, and feeling that, at last, he had found an answer to the questions that afflicted him. In the twilight of that day, while the last lights were going out and the darkness became delicate and inviting, Michael walked again with his thoughts reordered and his heart inflamed by a new hope. The silent call of fate, revealed in the simplicity of that dialogue, transformed the way he faced life. Each step from there carried the weight and, at the same time, the lightness of a conscious choice to connect with the divine. He understood that the secret was not in waiting for big events, but in noticing and valuing those small moments that, when added together, drew the great map of his existence. So the young man went on his way, now illuminated by a newfound certainty that fate, with its perfect choreography between chance and faith, will always find a way to speak to those who are willing to listen. And as the night settled with the starry mantle announcing a new cycle, Miguel felt, deep in his soul, that every heartbeat was a response to the call of the universe, an invitation to live life with purpose, confidence, and above all, with the conviction that in every nuance of existence, God was present, silently guiding your steps towards a future of infinite possibilities. In the silence of a dimly lit room, where the dim light mingled with the shadows of the ancient objects, Miguel found himself immersed in a search that went beyond what his eyes could see. It was as if the environment itself conspired to reveal secrets long buried in the memory of his soul. In that improvised sacred space, a small wooden table wore the marks of time and served as an altar for a reflection, where faith and personal search met in an uninterrupted dialogue. The beginning of this inner journey came on a rainy day, when the regular, steady sound of drops hitting the window created a hypnotic melody, inviting him to delve into his own depths. Sitting next to a lamp of yellowish light, Miguel opened a notebook whose pages seemed eager to receive every thought. Each written word was not merely ink on paper, but rather the record of a soul struggling to understand the immensity of its being and the reason for its existence. As the rain continued to touch the roof, his heart beat to a beat that seemed to synchronize with those chords of a distant song, perhaps an echo of God Only God. This song, which had so often offered her comfort, now aroused a series of questions about her own fears, doubts, and the genuine need to connect with something greater. In each scribbled line, Miguel sought answers to questions that echoed in his thoughts. Who am I really? What is the meaning of my pains? And where is the divine presence that I so long to feel? In the intimacy of that room, the environment was transmuted into a space where time seemed to extend. The air was impregnated with simple fragrances, the soft odor of an incense that someone had left there, perhaps decades ago, and the moist, comforting smell that the rain brought with it. Each object, from the small statues that rested in a corner to the yellowed pictures hanging on the wall, gained the role of silent witness to a constant search for the meaning of existence. Miguel indulged in long hours of reflection, sometimes interrupted by the faint sound of the distant city. During those moments, he would close his eyes and allow himself to relive childhood memories. Those times when the world seemed to be full of magic and endless possibilities. He remembered when, sitting on his grandmother's lap, he listened to stories full of charms and ancestral wisdom. These narratives were like doors that opened to parallel realities, where good and evil balanced in an eternal game. Today, rediscovering these memories allowed him to understand that perhaps the key to his transformation lay precisely in the rescue of this lost innocence, in the authenticity of the feelings that once overflowed from his heart. At the same time that Miguel recorded each thought, a feeling of restlessness was present. It was not a negative anguish, but the typical restlessness of a mind that cries out for deeper answers. In the midst of the calm of that room, he found himself challenged by his own doubts, the reason for certain events that marked his life, the reason for the challenges he seemed to face, and above all, the search for a connection with the divine that seemed palpable to him. This internal struggle was comparable to a crossing through a desert in search of an oasis, where every ounce of understanding became vital to his spiritual survival. While writing and reflecting, Miguel got lost in daydreams that transported him to symbolic scenarios. He imagined himself walking through a vast and clear field, where the horizon was drawn without limits, and time was just a companion on the journey. In this vastness, the figure of God, or whatever represented the totality of good and justice, emerged as an elusive presence, a beacon that would guide his steps even when darkness threatened to swallow his hopes. This interior scenery was vividly detailed, the sun's rays tickling the soft grass, the distant noise of a stream whispering life's secrets, and the singing of birds that sounded like a celestial orchestra composing hymns of renewal. And so, between reflections and images that intertwined, Miguel began to understand that the answer to so many concerns lay in accepting his own weaknesses, embracing them and transforming them into the tool for his evolution. Each doubt, each tear shed in silence, turned into a valuable learning. Basically, the inner journey was not a search for definitive answers, but rather a continuous process of self-knowledge and openness to the multiple facets of existence. He understood that moments of silence, where the soul has the freedom to dialogue with itself, are as essential as moments of action, because it is in these moments that the true self pulsates with strength and integrity. The days followed one another, and with them, the incisive onslaughts of restlessness became a daily ritual. Miguel began to reserve specific periods to isolate himself in his room, full of symbols that reminded him of the divine presence, from lit candles that projected dancing shadows to small objects of his faith inherited from loved ones who kept stories of struggle and overcoming. Each item present there was a piece of the puzzle of his identity, contributing to the labyrinth of thoughts becoming more and more illuminated. In this process, writing ceased to be just an exercise to become a deep dialogue with one's own spirit. The words formed on the pages of the notebook were actually silent prayers, requests for guidance, and declarations of a personal commitment to transformation. Miguel discovered that, by externalizing his pains, his longings, and even his most intimate doubts, he was, in fact, paving the way for greater forces to manifest themselves in his life. This written confession was a foundation for the reconstruction of his faith, a faith that, so long dormant, was beginning to awaken with renewed intensity. In the midst of this experience, sleepless nights of intense reflection turned into almost mystical moments. Leaning back on the bed, under the serene glow of the moon that filtered through the window, Miguel allowed those thoughts to become entangled in dreams, creating bridges between the conscious and the unconscious. Dreams, in turn, brought coded messages, images of flowery paths, infinite horizons, and encounters with illuminated figures that represented ancestral wisdom passed down from generation to generation. It was as if each dream was a clue to unravel the mysteries of his own existence, step by step, as in a mosaic of clairvoyance and revelation. Miguel's inner journey, permeated by so much introspection, culminated in the realization that the search for answers was not an end in itself, but a continuous process of renewal and growth. He learned that each discovery, no matter how subtle, added more color to his soul's palette, allowing moments of pain to be sculpted into works of pure inspiration and resilience. Over time, the feeling of being lost began to give way to that of being directed by an invisible but infinitely present force, the one we all call faith, divine love, that transcends rational understanding. At the end of this stage, Miguel no longer saw the inner journey as an arduous and lonely journey, but rather as a harmonious dance between his weaknesses and strengths. Every word written, every tear shed in the midst of loneliness contributed to forging a new vision of oneself, a vision where the spirit was free to reinvent itself, where each little answer revealed illuminated the way to a fuller and more conscious existence. Thus, in this particular sanctuary of thoughts and feelings, Michael learned that true wisdom lies not in the complete and definitive answer, but in the beauty of the incessant and genuine search for self-knowledge. With each new dawn, he took himself with the certainty that the inner journey was, above all, the noblest of stories of faith and redemption, a story that, although full of enigmas, inspired with every beat of his heart to celebrate the greatness of life itself. On a night when the sky was dotted with stars and the breeze seemed to carry whispers of ancient times, Miguel decided to venture into the most forgotten corners of the city center until he reached the old church, a construction that, although worn out by time, exuded an aura of mystery and reverence. As he approached, he felt a subtle transformation, as if each step took him away from urban sounds and into a space where eternity was palpable. The immense wooden door, worked with carvings that told stories of faith and overcoming, creaked when pushed, as an invitation to unveil secrets that had long rested in the waves of time. Inside, the room was softly lit by candles arranged on antique candlesticks, the flickering flames drawing shadows that danced over walls lined with colorful stained glass windows. Each stained glass window seemed to tell the narrative of a miracle, of a story of redemption, where the light filtered and painted the central sacred cross of the altar in vibrant colors. Miguel stopped, amazed, before the grandeur of that sacred space. The air was impregnated with a perfume that mixed incense and the soft aroma of melting wax, bringing to mind sensations of purity and a peace he had never known before. When he looked up, he found the stained glass window that depicted the serene figure of a deity, flanked by angels who seemed to float in an eternal embrace of light. At that moment, something inexplicable awoke in his core. It was as if the divine was present, not in the form of words or gestures, but in a subtle pulse that touched every fiber of his being. Walking slowly down the central aisle of the church, Miguel noticed that every detail seemed to have been carefully orchestrated to awaken in him a sense of belonging and consecration. The echoing sound of his footsteps on the polished stone floor mingled with the barely perceptible murmur of prayers that seemed to come from all corners of the room. There, each corner was a tribute to devotion, and each breath carried the weight and lightness of a faith that crossed generations. As he approached the altar, Miguel felt his heart race. The altar, adorned by floral arrangements and candles that divided the dim light into small spotlights, seemed like a portal to another dimension, a space where the pains of the past dissolved and where hope found its refuge. There, in that stillness full of symbolism, he paused to meditate. For a few long minutes, he let himself be enveloped by the mystical atmosphere, allowing thoughts and feelings to flow like a tranquil river, unclogging the barriers of time and revealing long-kept secrets. In a corner of the church, a figure stood out for its simplicity and serenity. An old man, with silver hair from the passing of the years and eyes that reflected the knowledge of a life dedicated to spirituality, was near the confessional. His calm, meditative posture seemed to communicate a powerful message about the value of silent faith. Michael, seized by curiosity and deep respect, approached slowly, allowing each step to be lost in the immensity of that sanctuary. The old man, as if sensing the young man's restless presence, received him with a discreet smile, but full of compassion. Without haste, he started a conversation that transcended time and words. With a low and welcoming voice, he began to reel off memories of a time when the church was the epicenter of hope and transformation. He spoke of simple and great miracles simultaneously, of the silent healing of a broken heart, of tears that turned into smiles through the divine touch, of men and women who found the strength to start over just when all seemed lost. As the old man spoke, Miguel felt as if each word had the power to illuminate dark corners of his soul. He saw in his mind vivid images of People who found redemption in small attitudes, whispered prayers in the moonlight, and simple surrender to the greater purpose. The elders' narrative intertwined with echoes of the song, "God Only God," which now seemed to turn into a silent mantra, repeated in every corner of the church, as a constant reminder of the Creator's benevolent presence. The sacred environment made it seem that the time there did not follow the laws of the outside world. The silence, broken only by the occasional whisper of prayer and the gentle tinkling of a cross striking lightly against the ancient altar, had the power to make every second extend for an eternity. Miguel absorbed every detail, the texture of the aged wood, the vibrant hues of the stained glass windows, blue, red, and green that blended together as in a divine watercolor, and the welcoming sound that came and went, as if the church itself breathed in communion. As the elder continued, describing the rituals that marked the trajectory of the faithful and the stories of each sacred object present there, Miguel felt an internal transformation. It was as if those stories, loaded with sacrifice, love, and devotion, presented him with a mirror turned to his own being. He began to see that the encounter with the divine was not an isolated event or one of great acclamation. It was a silent process, made up of small signs and a complete surrender to what really matters. Every emotion, every silent tear he had swallowed in the course of his life, now found a place of welcome and understanding in that sanctuary of light and shadows. As he said goodbye to the old man, Miguel felt the weight of an inner revelation. There, in the sacred sanctuary, he learned that the divine is expressed in unusual and simple ways. Spectacular miracles were not necessary for faith to manifest itself. All it took was a compassionate look, the glow of a candle, or the soft tinkling of a cassock as she walked through the aisles of the church. Thy encounter with the divine was, therefore, an experience of self-knowledge, where each symbol, each detail of sacred architecture was an invitation to rediscover oneself and reconnect with the essence of life and love. Miguel remained there for long moments, sitting on one of the wooden benches that, worn out by use, kept the memory of countless prayers. He closed his eyes and allowed the silence to turn into an intimate dialogue with his own soul. In the midst of the dim light and the intermittent glow of the candles, she felt an unexpected peace invade her being, as if every corner of her existence had finally found its rightful place. It was a feeling of completeness, of being exactly where it should be, welcomed by a presence that transcends human understanding. In that meeting, Michael realized that the true expression of the divine was not in grand gestures or high-sounding declarations, but in the simple details that together form a whole of love and care. The church, with its modest architecture but full of meaning, was a microcosm of faith that showed him that every life, every story, is a fundamental piece in the great tapestry of the universe. The message that echoed through the sacred precinct was clear. Each soul is unique and indispensable, and the true essence of the divine is revealed in the ability to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary through the light of hope and the strength of love. As he left the church that night, Michael carried with him not only the image of a charming environment, but the certainty that the divine dwells everywhere, in the simplicity of a gesture, in the purity of a prayer, and in the endless search for the good. His heart, once full of uncertainty, now beat with the calm and sure rhythm of someone who had found, even if only briefly, the true essence of spirituality. The encounter with the divine had become an anchor, a light that would guide him through turbulent paths and remind him always that where there is faith, there is the promise of renewal and eternal love. In the journey of faith, Miguel's trajectory becomes a true mosaic of challenges and discoveries that alternate in a rhythm almost choreographed by fate. Each obstacle faced on the way is not just a barrier to be overcome, but a profound lesson that pushes you to evolve, to transform pain into strength and uncertainty into wisdom. Thus, at every step, Miguel understands that life is, above all, a constant process of learning and resignification. As soon as he leaves behind the refuge of those prayers and the encounter with the divine, the young man finds himself immersed in a vibrant reality, but full of contrasts. The streets which moments before welcomed him with the tenderness of the whispers of the wind now present a scenario where the shadows of doubts and the harshness of reality impose themselves. Living with a society that often ignores the lightness of spirituality makes Miguel's journey torrential and challenging. At every corner, however, he realizes that the challenges he faces, from conflicts with relatives who do not understand his internal change to criticism from those who see his faith as illusory, carry in themselves the seed of great discoveries, revealing the importance of walking one's own path, even if it is lonely. In the midst of professional pressures and constant demands from the urban environment, Miguel is faced with moments when the absence of support and the feeling of incomprehension emerge as a silent scream. He recalls the difficulties of staying true to the message in God Only God, a song that inspired him to fight even when reality seemed merciless. Each obstacle is presented, then, as an invitation to revisit your principles and reaffirm your faith. In the lonely dawns while the world sleeps, Miguel faces an internal battle that transcends the physical. It is a struggle between keeping the flame of the dream alive or succumbing to the apathy that surrounds him. The experience of challenges becomes for him a laboratory where faith is put to the test and refined through the confrontation of pain and loss. He remembers, in one of those moments of storm, a day when the rain seemed to insist on washing the soul, but also to highlight the scars of a difficult past. Her sadness was mixed with tears that, when rolling, brought with them not only grief, but an awakening to the beauty contained in vulnerability. It was in this scenario of rain, and alone, walking through empty avenues, that he felt the soft voice of the song resonate in his heart, reminding him that even in adversity, there is room for redemption and for the reconstruction of a more authentic self. Every challenge that stood in Miguel's path was punctuated by discoveries that swept away the conventions of what he believed was possible. For example, in the midst of family conflicts, where words were sharp as blades and silences carried the weight of misunderstanding, he learned that forgiveness could be the very key to freeing entrenched hearts. On a remarkable occasion, after an episode of confrontations and sorrows, Miguel found in an old city park a group of children who were playing with innocence and joy. Observing that scenario, he understood that the purity and resilience of those small beings were capable of illustrating what he was looking for: the ability to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. That vision gave him an unexpected discovery. Challenges are also a mirror in which to glimpse the future. If you have the courage to look inside and recognize the strength that resides in each scar. This epiphany pushed him to believe that setbacks, pains, failures, losses are part of a journey that, if faced with courage, can be transformed into opportunities for inner growth. In the hours of solitude, as he walked through deserted streets and let the sound of the city mix with his thoughts, Miguel noticed that each difficulty conveyed a silent message: be reborn, resignify, rebuild. The dialogue he had with himself in these moments was deep and loaded with symbolism. He imagined that each obstacle was a kind of training offered by the universe itself to prepare him for greater challenges, but also for experiences of redemption and conquest. With each challenge overcome, new discoveries unfolded like the petals of a flower that gradually reveals itself. In casual encounters with people who, like him, struggled to keep the flame of faith alive, Miguel found the concrete demonstration that the divine manifests itself in the smallest actions, in the altruistic gesture of a stranger, in the look of solidarity of a friend, in the embrace that comforts without the need for words. These experiences reinforce the central message of the song, God Only God, helping him understand that divine power lurks in the nuances of everyday life, even in the most painful situations. On an afternoon when, after an intense argument with a relative, the feeling of helplessness almost overwhelmed him, He took refuge in an old cafe. There, between steaming cups of tea and the comforting murmur of the environment, Miguel allowed himself to listen to his own breath and meditate on the challenges that stood in his way. He realized that although the setbacks could seem insurmountable, each one held an unprecedented potential for self-knowledge and renewal. He spent hours recording in his notebook not only the afflictions that plagued him, but also the small victories, the smiles of strangers, the accidental reunions with friends who reminded him of his essence, the insights that flashed like flashes of light in the darkness. These discoveries transformed his view of the challenges, making him see that the path of faith is, in itself, a catalyst for change. When reflecting on moments when he felt his heart was heavy and aimless, Miguel understood that overcoming is not in the denial of suffering, but in the ability to embrace it and transform it into learning. Thus, that emotional exile, the feeling of being lost in the midst of the immensity of everyday problems, was, over time, becoming the fertile ground where resilience germinated. Every tear, every sigh, and every silent scream was reinterpreted as notes in a symphony of self-transformation. Miguel soon realized that the challenges and discoveries were actually two sides of the same coin. What seemed to be the weight of the world on his shoulders gradually became an indicator that the faith he carried was powerful and, above all, true. He learned that pain can be the great teacher, guiding him to rediscover the values that, despite shocks and losses, remain unshaken. This understanding strengthened him, allowing him to move forward with a renewed conviction that no matter how much grief life threw at him, he could always find within himself the foundation that could sustain him and propel him toward the light. At the end of each day, in the silence that precedes rest, Miguel surrendered to self-knowledge as if saying goodbye to an exuberant journey. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he relived in his mind every encounter, every tear, every smile, and turned them into silent prayers. These prayers, full of gratitude and hope, echoed in the emptiness of the room, as proof that faith is not an unshakable certainty, but the daily journey of reinventing oneself even in the midst of the greatest challenges. By facing obstacles with the courage of someone who discovered that pain contains within him the seed of overcoming, Miguel experienced an internal metamorphosis. He realized that each difficulty was in itself an opportunity to reveal hidden layers of his essence, and that by allowing himself to feel and learn, he was getting closer and closer to an expanded understanding of what it meant to live with faith and purpose. In this way, challenges were no longer seen as burdens, but as steps that propelled him to a level of consciousness where the divine was present in the small and powerful actions of daily life. And so, as the sun set and the city prepared for the calm of the night, Miguel recognized that the challenges and discoveries were, in fact, the traces that drew the true map of his existence. A map made of risks taken, pains faced, and above all, of a faith that, even shaken, was renewed with each new dawn. In this interweaving of experiences, he understood that the path of faith is paved not only by moments of ecstasy and displeasure, but by the constant rediscovery of oneself and the recognition that each crisis is the harbinger of a divine and personal transformation. At the height of his dilemma, when skepticism threatens to take over his soul, Miguel faces a real duel with his shadows. The narrative becomes a visual metaphor, images of inner storms, elongating shadows, and a frantic search for light in the midst of a gray world. Each scene is carefully designed to convey the feeling of an epic internal battle, the struggle for one's being, where faith becomes the sword and hope the shield. The song at this moment intensifies the drama. Its deep chords and striking lyrics reinforce the message that even in despair, there is a path to redemption. Miguel, with his face marked by pain and eyes that shine with determination, decides to face his anguish, seeking in silence a sign of peace. It is in this scenario that the narrative highlights the transformative power of believing in something greater than ourselves. A reminder that, even among the darkness, there is always a divine spark ready to ignite the light of overcoming. Over time, internal struggles give way to moments of surprising overcoming. Miguel begins to witness what only the eyes of faith can see. Small miracles that, although discreet, transform the routine and renew trust in God. They are stories of neighbors helping each other, gestures of unconditional love, and miraculous coincidences, each reinforcing the idea that God acts in subtle but ever-present ways. On a bright afternoon, while walking down a street decorated with the vividness of the colors of the sunset, Miguel observes a group of children playing and singing with enthusiasm. This scene, apparently simple, is loaded with symbolism: innocence, the purity of faith, and the certainty that divine grace is manifested in every detail. Everyday miracles not only restore your hope, but they also propel you to share your discoveries with others, spreading the message that where there is faith, there is the unchanging presence of God. At the end of this first phase of his journey, Miguel finds himself at a turning point. After so many trials and revelations, the certainty that God, only God, is the support of his existence is unshakably consolidated. The narrative closes with a scene in which the protagonist, now more mature and aware of his path, contemplates a horizon where the light shines brightly, a metaphor for faith itself that, despite the emotional winters, is always reborn. In the aftermath of this aftermath of emotions, countless symbols intertwine: the flame of a candle, the glow of a morning dew, and the distant echo of a celestial choir. The video closes this first part with a cliffhanger loaded with mystery. Something great is announced on the horizon, a revelation that promises to elevate Miguel's journey to an even more extraordinary level. And so, with the heart beating with anticipation and the promise that the best is yet to come, the final screen displays an irresistible invitation. Keep watching. The next stage of this journey of faith and transformation is about to be revealed.